you, Dika, for this opportunity. Everybody, thank you. Um, Also, even Ian for organize this forum, and also Brando for taking bold lead steps to also lead the discussion in English. This is probably your first time lead discussion in English. So congratulations to you, Brando. And Mas Jojo Jonathan, this is Mas Jojo's three time to Salatiga first time. It was a long time ago.
Sebelum COVID.
Yeah, before COVID. Mas Jojo came here during our mini graduate student seminar. And the second time, it's also before COVID. During the final of soccer, POM soccer competition, and it was FTE and economy or something, and it was really like big crowd. Mas Jojo come with Diana, his wife here, and we also after the talk we all enjoy the final. So this is the third time. So thank you very much, Mas Jojo. We will invite Mas Jojo one more time to talk about ethnography of social movement. Um, if not this semester, because Mas Jojo will go back to UK and then to US. He got dual citizenship. British citizenship and American citizenship.
Yeah.
He's like number one, like the number one citizen of the world.
Kolonialisme dua, yang baru dan yang lama.
So again, thank you, Mas Jojo, for accepting our invitation to share your research with us, with college and students in our program. We will invite you more next year. Even then, I will talk to him about the possibility to have our English class next year. We pray for us, hoping that we can continue our plan to have English class. So we will probably have two class every year. We have Indonesian class and we have English class. So we'll invite Mas Jojo more for that as well. So yeah, so thank you so much, and thank you so much for everything, and also for the grant. Yeah, congratulations. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So thanks to Ref Isaklatu for the welcome he's given. Without waiting any longer, we will start the discussion. I hope you will enjoy the discussion well. And of course, the discussion will be moderated by one of the students from the Sociology of Religion Master of 2022. We welcome Brando Matoke to the time and place is yours. Let's give a big round of applause. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can you be over there? Oh yeah, okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Master of Ceremony. My friend Judika. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to seminar of the Master of Sociology Religion on the topic Religion, Ecology, and Citizenship in Indonesia. This topic will be explained by our speaker, Mr. Jonathan Smith. Mr. Jonathan is researcher in theology and religious study at the University of Leeds. He also teaches at the master program at the Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Study, Gajah Mada University. His research explore how religious group participate in social movement and respond to shared social challenges. Mm, I handed over the time and opportunity to speaker to present the material. Please, Mr.
Okay, thank you. I think ada mau masih kita. Oh, oke, ada mikrofonnya. Ya,
Oke, oke.
enak. Kasih ya. Oke. Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, terima kasih Ando dan Yudika, Mas ya, Pak Yudika, and thank you, terima kasih banyak undangan dari Prof. Isaac, and very kind introduction, and also for Irene. It's really good to be here with all of you. Sebelum mulai, mau mungkin minta izin bicara like bahasa Inggris, okay? Or campur-campur. Because mungkin bahasa bahasa Indonesia saya lebih buruk daripada bahasa Inggris Anda semua. Saya pikir mencoba. We'll see. Are you in this group? Are you any of you are S2 students? Just siswa S2? Okay, siswa S2. Okay, then from yeah. Okay. And are you in sosiologi agama atau jurusan lain? Semuanya sosiologi agama. Okay, good. Okay, so just to make sure when I say it's relevant, useful to you. Ya, sebelum coba like bicara sedikit bahasa Inggris dan mungkin campur bahasa Indonesia juga. Oke? Dan minta maaf karena masih belajar bahasa Indonesia dan ya terima kasih atas keseruan Anda semua ya. Karena masih ya rusak. So yeah, sekarang saya I'm doing a project selama 2 tahun di CLCS UGM. Tahu CLCS UGM? Tahu ya? Tentang gimana gerakan sosial lingkungan menggunakan konsep dan praktik gaya dan budaya, agama dan budaya untuk menghadapi krisis lingkungan. Dan ini proyek hampir selesai, dana selesai, akan selesai, biaya dan selesai akhir bulan ini, tapi mungkin memperpanjang proyek lebih lama. So I thought because you are social agama students, I can talk a little bit about mungkin relevant dan signifikan riset ini tentang pertanian penting sosiologi agama di Indonesia. Dan as you can see, saya tidak orang Indonesia dari luar negeri. So maybe there can be a lot of mistakes in what I'm saying. So I hope we can have some discussion and you can help me to understand better lebih baik paham konteks, lebih paham situasi. Juga di Salatiga berbeda daripada area lain. But ini proyek kerjasama dengan teman-teman UGM, ada Prof. Dr. Samsul Marif, Mas Arju, Ketua Prodi di CCS. Juga ada satu sudah lulus S2 namanya Ronald Adam, and he kerja di proyek sebagai assistant. So kami kerja sama di proyek ini. So also not only me, myself. Okay, so maybe I'll talk for I don't know 30 minutes, okay, or less, more. Yeah, okay. Like maybe like seperti 30 menit, then we can have some discussion after that. So thinking about ini pertanyaan agama, ekologi dan citizenship. Apa? Citizenship. Di bahasa Indonesia. Kewarganegaraan. Kewarganegaraan. Keduanya. There's some relevance to what we've been researching. One of the questions that we're researching and trying to answer is how do religious traditions respond to environmental change and crisis in Indonesia. Bagaimana tradisi keagamaan merespons perubahan dan krisis lingkungan di Indonesia. Mungkin ada satu kelompok berpendapat bahwa agama berkontribusi terhadap perusakan ekologi. Sementara kelompok lain berpendapat bahwa agama adalah kekuatan untuk menyelamatkan lingkungan. So ada like the group, the kelompok, they're discussing this, and you have a lot of arguments. You can see one article that says, religion will save the environment. Another article says religion is destroying the environment. So how do we answer this question? Uh, so dari pendapat kami, kedua belah pihak cenderung memandang agama sebagai seperangkat keyakinan atau praktik yang final. So mungkin there's an idea that somehow religion is static, that it doesn't change. And as siswa sosiologi agama, we know that other ideas of religion can change over time. So in our study, to answer the question, what we've done is try to look at different methods to look at the existing empirical data about how social movements address environmental issues in local communities in Indonesia by using lived religious resources to create new environmental practices. So I will explain all of these terms, but I'll just give you like any preview this to see. So especially how this question about lived religious resources, what we mean by kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari, or whatever we want to call it. So from our perspective, we want to see what's the connection between the tradition of religion and the practice of religion, and how people then respond to these crises. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about key terms. So seperti gerakan sosial, masyarakat sekitar, masyarakat lokal, dan what we mean by kehidupan keagamaan hari-hari, religion, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the method dan temuan studi yang ada, and then a little bit about maybe aplikasinya untuk studi-studi agama dan studi sosiologi agama, khususnya di agama dan ekologi. Okay, so like key terms. So social movements, gerakan sosial. There are many definitions of them. So it's important to know that for our study, when we talk about social movements, we have a very broad definition. So like jaringan luas orang dan organisasi yang terlibat dalam aksi kolektif dalam mengejar manfaat lingkungan. So this is following the definition of roots from 1998. So it can include like what we think of as gerakan lingkungan. Like if you hear the word gerakan lingkungan, do you think of Greenpeace, Wally, or something, like very, or activists, LSM, that work about the environment, or maybe we think about that are working around environmental justice. So trying to improve the situation for people who are experiencing environmental injustice, but also for people who are trying to change the behavior of local communities. So mungkin juga masyarakat atau individu lokal untuk mengatasi tantangan lingkungan. So it could be something very local in the community. So it's very broad definition we're using. And this is important because we want to focus also on the idea of masyarakat lokal, because this is a very common term that's used. And what do we mean by this? The important thing is that the local konteks lokal membentuk bagaimana gerakan mengadopsi strategi dan dasar yang berbeda, termasuk yang religius. So the way that religion works depends a lot on what happens in each community. Maybe praktik Kristen di Salatiga berbeda daripada praktik Kristen di Jogja. Sama atau berbeda mungkin? I don't know. So maybe even with the same religion, it could be different depending on the local community. Maybe even practice of Christianity in Salatiga di kota berbeda daripada kabupaten mungkin. Yeah, so we're thinking about how the local context affects that. Also, we look at the idea that social movements, they use narratives to try to create bridges between different groups. So this is following the idea of like framing, and also they can create frames. So untuk aksi collective. So for environmental movements, they take the frame, maybe frame religious, other frame science, other frame economy, and how they use different frames in order to try to support the movement. The third aspect of the key term is about the context of Indonesia. So, as you know, Indonesia is the front line of environmental crisis. There are, krisis lingkungan. There are ratusan gerakan yang sudah aktif di Indonesia. And also there is, keragaman dan praktik agama yang dinamis dan, very diverse. Yeah, there are so many religions, traditions, cultures. So it's a really interesting place to see to understand this question, as you know. Like for example, most of you are from a lot of different areas of Indonesia, right? Some from Java, some from maybe Maluku or NTT, Medan, Sumatra. So the environmental situation in Medan is different than konteks lingkungan di Salatiga atau Papua atau Maluku. So it's important to think about how these kind of questions fit together. And the last key term is about lived religion, which we tried to think of a definition because there isn't really a term in Indonesian for it that we found. So we tried to use the term kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like a way that people practice their religion every day. So it may be different than it's following the idea of religion that we have maybe tiga jenis religion sesuai Elizabeth Hurd talking about religion, that we have official religion or agama resmi, that's the ditentukan oleh lembaga resmi pemerintah. So we have the religion that's set by the government. Like in Indonesia, there are only berapa agama ada resmi, agama resmi di Indonesia? Yeah. So there are only 6. But actually there are a lot more, yeah? But according to, the agama resmi. Also we have agama ahli. So the agama di universitas, agama dari ahli mungkin akademis, mungkin juga ahli tokoh agama atau pemuka agama. They have their own definition of religion. But then there is also the lived religion, which is what you say, praktik masyarakat lokal sehari-hari daripada doktrin atau bentuk institusional agama. So it's not so much focused on theology, ide theology, but like practice. So some of you do practical theology, ada that study practical theology? Yeah. It's practical theology. Yeah. So this is thinking out of this. What is practical theology? Not just, the ideas of theology. So we took with these terms as a background. So what we're doing in our study, it's a 2-year study, almost finished, and there are 3 types of methods we used. Salah satu ini is a framework synthesis, which is a way of taking data that already exists to try to learn from it. So we used, for example, the journal articles, thesis from students, some really good theses that have been done about gerakan lingkungan, and we were able to collect data using this method about 208 environmental movements. So 28, not 20, maaf, 208 environmental movements between 1990 and 2022. And the results of the study, which I'll talk about now, hasilnya sudah, well, kind of published. This is the link. It's available online, so you can see. This is the versi preprint, and it's about to be published in the journal. But journals, pelan pelan. So you can read the results So also there is ada versi artikel di bahasa Indonesia juga, but also belum diterbit. So hopefully soon it will be. Then we also did semi-structured interviews with the pemimpin gerakan sosial in some different areas to add to the data. And then we also have been doing ethnography of satu gerakan sosial lingkungan di Gunung Kidul that works on isu air dan akses air bersih and sumber air seperti itu. So we're using all of this data together for the study. Just to explain about the method that we used a bit more, because have any of you heard of this before? Framework synthesis? Ada yang tahu? It's not used so much in Indonesia, not even also maybe in sociology, it's not used that much. But the idea is that you try to take all the different data together and try to make one idea or one model by taking the learning or the ideas from different data. So taking studi kualitatif yang sudah ada, we can menjadi sebuah modul konseptual yang berguna dan dapat dipahami. And then, so this is, synthesis is like, it's taking from the studies that already exist that have been done. And the idea is we use we say critical interpretive lens, which just means that we try to understand the meaning behind the studies and interpret them critically for doing that. And there's some great studies which I can share if you want to try this method. I think for Indonesia it's very important because, for example, in CRCS, CRCS has been going since the year 2000. And we have every year about seperti 25 mahasiswa, and usually about maybe 5 or 6 students every year do a study about some type of gerakan sosial or about ecology. But often the data is done and the studies are really interesting and really good, but no one uses the data. So we just have banyak studi-studi, but no one thinks, okay, what can we learn from all of these studies together? So doing that system, which you can see in the article, it explains, step by step how we did it. We collected 244 studies in bahasa Inggris dan bahasa Indonesia, and it includes 208 movements in all 38 provinces. So at least one from each province. When we started the study, there were 34 provinsi, now there are 38. So it's changing quickly because now there are, in Papua now there are 6 provinces, I think. Yeah. Before there were only 2, now there are 6. So we have at least one, but you can see that for example we have the most studies are in Java. If you see, there are 33 in East Java, and a lot in Jawa Tengah, Jawa Barat, and quite a lot in Kalimantan, in Sumatra, but less in Papua. And this is because, why is this? Because most people, when they do studies, they do them, it's very Java centrist. Yeah. If you want to find studies, you can find so many studies about Java. For example, there's a famous movement in Java. Do you know the Kendang Mountains movement, the Sedul Sikap, which is a social movement about the cement mining in Java? If you look online, you will find maybe 20 or 25 studies just about this movement. But in Papua, there are maybe 50 movements. There's not any study about them. You can find newspaper articles, you can find blogs, you can find, but you can't see any research that has been done on these movements. So it's a problem that we have, that the research tends to be so focused. But we tried to get, at least we got some from NTT, from Papua, from other places as well. So yeah. So what about the results? Yes, we had, the study had multiple environmental issues, so we tried to take questions like adaptasi perubahan iklim, pengelolaan lahan, limbah dan air, polusi, pertambangan, dan industri, which is a big issue, keanekaragamaan hayati, dan konservasi, so the groups that just want to raise awareness in the environment, and kesadaran lingkungan as another one as well. And we managed to find information from each of the main religions in Indonesia, so all, the 6 official religions, but also a lot from masyarakat adat and many other ideas of religion, which we'll talk about later. So, what did we find? Now, this is probably any Sociology Agama 101, yeah? Which is that the role of religion is ambivalent. Have you done this before from Scott Appleby? Ambivalent religion? Is that, which means that we can't necessarily find religion as having a good or bad or a positive or negative, but it can be many things at once in how communities respond to environmental crises. But in our research, we looked at this idea that's called religious creativity, creativitas religios, which is by a scholar named Willis Jenkins from Virginia, University of Virginia. And the idea of religious creativity is menemukan cara hidup baru dengan membengkai ulang dan mengadaptasi keyakinan untuk mengatasi tantangan lingkungan. So it's how the communities can create new responses, new ideas, using religion and using ecology together in some creative ways. So the goal of our study was to create a kind of conceptual model which looks at, for example, how does the context, local, influence the response to be the ecological response, the religious response, which concept, praktik, ritual, dan sistem digunakan oleh gerakan lingkungan, and what's the process that they use to, as we say, it's mengambil yang sudah ada menjadi konsep dan praktik yang baru. So how does this process happen? And it's influenced by context, content, also by the methods that are used, like strategi than the tactics of gerakan, and also by what we say is like kualitas partisipasi lokal. So how do people work locally together? So this is the model that we made used from the research, and I'll explain more in the findings. So I have 4 findings to share. Ada 4 temuan, and I will give some examples also that will help. So the first thing is, what did we find about what we say lived religion, or keagamaan, kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari? We thought there were like 3 categories. Now, any category, it's not like category, apple dan jeruk. It's not like that everyone is one or the other, but it means we could find 3 kind of main types that were used. We have the kehidupan praktik beragama sehari-hari for the agama resmi. So, using Buddha, Konghucu, Kristen, Catholic, Hindu, dan Islam. We have a lot of examples of this. But we also had a lot of examples about the sistem dan nilai masyarakat adat, because a lot of environmental movements are specifically about masyarakat adat. But also, the third category, really interesting, is one we hear about a lot, kepercayaan, tradisi, dan kearifan lokal. So, have you heard this, kearifan lokal? Have you heard this term? Sudah dengar. So, many of the studies, they use this term a lot. And sometimes kearifan lokal, it means rituals, it means like sistem pertanian, it could mean a lot of things. And some places it might be like agama, some places it might not be like agama. But it's used a lot in the literature, so it's very interesting. And what did we find? In the research from the 208 movements, we found 571, 571 examples of kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari, including concepts. Like I have some examples here, the idea of fangshen in Buddhist, the idea of stewardship, which is used by Christians, Kejifuli, which is a Confucian idea about reducing consumption, Trihita which is a Hindu concept which is used in Bali a lot. I don't know if you've heard the Trihita about the balance between people, the divine, and nature, the balance between them. The idea of Khilafa, I have to get this right, I always get wrong between Khilafa and Khalifa. Khilafa al-Arid and Hima. So the idea that people are responsible for nature as an Islamic concept. The idea of the forest, like a hutan atau tanah sakral, which is used in a lot of like masyarakat adat, and also things even like local, like pawang hujan, which I'll talk about later, which is, you know, can be like, is that pawang hujan? Is that budaya? Is it agama? Is it tradisi? What is it? So yeah, this is interesting kind of concept. We also found 57 practices. So praktek seperti selamatan, sedekah sampah, istighosah, which are some examples of Islamic, but we found them in many different religions. We found a lot of rituals like Nyadran Kali, which is a ritual which is kind of local but also could be Buddhist or Islamic maybe. Melasti, Buai Niali is a Lombok ritual to do with rain. And we found a lot of systems, like for managing forests, for managing rivers, seas, 123 systems. So a lot of data. And actually there's a map of this, which I can share. We have a map where you can look at all of the data and find it. In fact, actually, I should have pulled it up when I had it, but I'll show it. I'll show it later. So basically, there's a lot. Ada banyak ya. If we say the resources that are used, sumber yang digunakan oleh gerakan lingkungan. But what do they do with them? So we say gerakan menggunakan synthesis antara konsep kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari, and they are connected with ecology, economic, science, legal, dan system lain-lain, which is interesting. And this is like a dynamic process, how they mix the different activities together, the way they include concept, praktek, ritual, dan system in a way to connect between ecology and agama budaya dan lain-lain. Yeah. So, for example, out of the 208 gerakan, 167 had some example of this kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari. So, most of them. But what's also interesting is that in the data, because many studies that are done in sociology agama, they start with the perspective of one religion. So, what about Christians and the environment? What about Muslims in Jember? How do they respond to mining? But when you look in our data, what we found is that the majority of cases, even when you had a case with world religion like Islam or Christianity, they also often used lokal, kearifan lokal, masyarakat adat ideas are also mixed together. So 70% of the cases that are world religion also used local wisdom or masyarakat adat. And 72% of the local also used some other religion or adat. The adat was a slight bit less for masyarakat adat, 41%, but still very high. So it's a lot of synthesis between the different things, which is really interesting. You could call this interreligious relations, maybe, in a creative way, maybe. Let's see. So to give you an example, in Java, actually not far from here, Temanggung. Have anyone been to Temanggung before? Sudah pernah di Temanggung? Okay, in Jawa Tengah. There is a village that has, a small village that has two communities. One community of Orang Jawa Buddha and another community of Orang Jawa Muslim. And they live in the same village. And there's a ritual that's done, which is called Nyadran Kali, which is an annual ritual that is involved in cleaning the river, cleaning the area of the town. Some places have another one called like Bersih Desa, or can be used in different, or Bersih Banyu or Bersih Sungai. So they have this ritual that's done every year. So the Comunitas Buddha di sana, they started to use the ritual as a practic Buddha. So they said this is not just a ritual for the village, but it should be a part of our practice as Buddhists. And then they started to build on the ritual to create a system to manage the sungai, dekat desa, dekat dusun. So they set in place a cleaning system and said that we should consider the river as being sacred and that we should protect it together. So the ritual already is done, and it's done by, Javanese people who could be Muslim, who could be Buddhist, who could be Hindu, who could be penghayat kepercayaan, and they use that as a way to work together. So it's like reviving a ritual as a way to kind of protect the environment. For another example of this kind of synthesis, in do people know the Minangkabau? Where the nasi padang? People know. Everyone knows nasi padang. Yeah. Yeah. So nasi padang, which I eat a lot though, but Minangkabau has a system in Sumatra Barat where they have this idea that a lot of times that the tradisi masyarakat adat Minangkabau is kind of ada synthesis dengan like teachings of Islam. So they have a thing that's a saying which is adat basandi sharia, sharia basandi kitab Allah. So that the idea that the adat and Islam should be put together. Now this can create some issues. For example, when you try to have nasi padang babi, and then some people said, tidak bisa, you can't have nasi padang babi because padang is Islam, yeah? Padang is tradisi Minangkabau Padang is Islam and adat. So it's not like it's not like a perfect system, but the idea of it is that there's this synthesis. So there was a project because dekat area di Minangkabau ada banyak hutan konservasi, and they had a project to work between the tokoh dan pemuka agama Islam dan juga komunitas masyarakat adat to create a system pengelolaan hutan bersama. And they tried to synthesize between the Islamic concepts like hima and harim to try to fit with the ideas of adat, hukum adat. So they used like sanksi for protecting the forest. They created a forest guard to protect the forest, and they tried to kind of synthesize between Islamic ideas and adat ideas to make a new sort of system for managing the forest. So this is really interesting because it's using the synthesis that already exists in the society, yeah, to try to manage the forest. So, well, as we said also, that not only are they mixing between religions, agama, budaya, agama, but also there's mixing between concept agama dan concept economy, concept science, concept legal. So, all of the movements use concept ecology because that's the idea of the study. But actually, we also found like Seratus Enam, thanks, yeah. Seratus Enam, they use menggunakan konsep agama dan konsep lain seperti economic, legal, dan scientific. And you can see here how many there are for each of the different ones. So the most were, where's my thing? Yeah. To make my pointer, sorry. Yeah. Okay. The most were just agama dan ekologi saja, but then there were also 55 economic dan agama, and then it goes all the way down to some that were actually economic, scientific, legal, and agama only together. But there was a lot of kind of synthesis. So for example, this comes back to the issue of Lombok. Do you remember the story about the MotoGP in Lombok? Was that 21, 22? Was that, I think, 21, yeah. And there was in the MotoGP, there was, hujan deras, and the race was being affected. So they invited some pawang hujan to come to course and to do the ritual. This picture is actually a picture of the Pawang Hujan who is doing the ritual in the MotoGP. Yeah, and this created a big controversy on Twitter. Yeah, actually called X now, and other places about Indonesia. Like, is it good to use Pawang Hujan or not? What does it say about Indonesia that we use Pawang Hujan? What do you think? Is it good to use Pawang Hujan for this situation? Is it a good thing of like local wisdom or tradisi, or is it like outdated or advanced, backward? So this is the debate. There's a debate, and it makes it seem like ada conflict, and ada like there is like science and agama atau budaya, and they are terpisah. Harus memilih. Either you use Pawang Hujan or you use scientists. You can't use both. Yeah, you have to pick. But actually, even in Lombok right now, there is a project which has scientists and Pawang Hujan who are working together with farmers in Lombok to try to mengadaptasi perubahan iklim di sistem pertanian di Lombok. So they created a system where they use both agrometeorological farming, so any like technique farming scientific, which is trying to use the weather patterns and adapt to them, because now with climate change you can't just depend, okay, ada musim hujan, ada musim kemarau, now we have to be adaptive. So they have a system which is scientific, but the scientists kerjasama dengan pawang hujan, and they use also ritual, they use all these things together. So we can see a synthesis between science and tradisi in some ways, which is interesting. Yeah. So the third finding is to do with the context, and it's about the question, why do some movements use religion and other movements do not? So we had, 167 menggunakan kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari, but we had 41 that didn't. So we tried to find out what are the factors that encourage using religion, and we found four factors. Satu, sacred land or resources being threatened or damaged. So this is when there is a situs sacral that is, under threat, then this would be a time when people would use religion. Also, insentif negara kepada identitas religius. Seperti there's a lot of communities, if you can say we are masyarakat adat, then you can get acceptance to have hukum adat and to have some things. So there's like an incentive, but then also sometimes there is a threat from the government about different religious groups. So this also causes religion to be used. The third factor is about the religious leadership. So pengaruh kepemimpinan agama, dan also the percaya di pemimpinan agama. So when there is a place where religious leaders have a lot of power or trust, then the movement would use religion because this is effective. And the fourth one is when you had the tradisi yang terdisrupsi baik karena perubahan lingkungan, degradasi lingkungan, dan pembangunan. So when there was a system, let's say, for managing a forest which had been disrupted, then people would try to respond untuk renovasi or recreate or redevelop the system to make it stronger. So we found these four factors. I'll give you one example from about the sacred land or resources in Bali. Have you ever heard of Tanah Lot? It's a very famous temple. Do you know that since I think since the 1990s, they keep making plans to try to build a hotel dekat Tanah Lot. Hotel, sometimes they try to make golf course. There are many things, different plans that keep happening. And every time they make plans, then there are a lot of protests because there are some ideas that there shouldn't be the temples in this part of Bali. There are, I think, 10 candi around the coast of Bali, and they're kind of like a religious protection for the island. So if you build too close to this, and especially if you build over it, like looking down on it, then it considers it disrupt the balance between people, nature, and the divine. So there have been a lot of protests about it when they tried to build it, and in fact, one time even in the election, the first election for Jokowi, 2014, the movement got a promise from him that if he was elected, they wouldn't build on this land. So they even they used a lot of political tactics. But also what they did was interesting, is they used there's a Hindu organization called Parisada Hindu Dharma Indonesia. It's like the Organisasi Nasional untuk Masyarakat untuk Komunitas Hindu, and they made a statement which made like a kind of hukum candi or hukum area sakral about where you can build. So bisa dibangun harus I think 3 kilo dari situs sakral. Tidak bisa dibangun lebih dekat 3 kilo. And then there were like a lot of things. And they made this as like a religious, like a kind of fatwa, Hindu fatwa, that you couldn't build there. And then the Pemerintah Bali, they accepted this as part of the law in Bali. So now in Bali, the law has to follow this religious law, I guess you can say. So this is interesting, using the idea that Tanah Lot is sacred, so there's a way to kind of resist the development. I'll give one last finding, and this one is very important, especially from the perspective of like Maluku and Papua and a lot of the current conflicts about mining. Like, for example, now, isn't there a big conflict in Maluku in Halmahera, is it? Halmahera? There's a nickel mining company now, and there's a lot of kind of issues around that. Yeah. So the fourth finding is that we found very high contestation. So contestasi and a lot of like perubahan in our study, and we had it in 3 different types. We have it di dalam komunitas or masyarakat lokal. You have people who support the movement and people who oppose the movement in every community, but also within each religious group. So, for example, in the conflicts in places that are mostly Christian, you maybe have some priests, ada pendeta yang dukung gerakan sosial, dan ada pendeta yang dukung perusahaan tambang. Yeah, and there is a lot of contestation within the community, but also there's a lot of contestation over time. So maybe you have one group in Order Baru, they were against the mine. Then in Era Reformasi, they supported the mine. Then recently, they opposed the mine. So you have a lot of changing that happens over time. And because of this, it means that we found that the partisipasi lokal dalam perubahan lingkungan mempengaruhi keberhasilan gerakan. So that it's really important to see how the community is involved, because there is like a constant fight between who can be more legitimate, between the government, between the movement, between companies, and that's a lot of things we found. So, for example, one of the longest movements in history in Indonesia is in Molo in Timor. Is anyone from Timor? Dari Timor? Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh yes, dari Timor. Ada. Sudah terdengar tentang Molo, tambang Molo. Yeah, it's famous. There's like a famous activist, Mama Aleta. Mama Aleta, you've heard about Mama Aleta? Yeah. So this movement is all the way. It started in Order Baru and it's still going now. But what's interesting is that in this movement, you have Masyarakat Adat, Molo, who think that this Gunung Molo is sakral and tidak bisa ditambang, on this mountain. But also the community is divided. So when the mine wanted to use the mine, they got some of the like pemimpin or tokoh masyarakat adat, they did a ritual to say that tanah ini tidak sakral anymore. So they did a ritual to say it's not sacred. Lalu the movement came to the spot and they did a movement to say no, menjadi sakral. So they were competing between the movements. Is it sacred? Is it not? And there was a big struggle within the community to support the mine or to oppose the mine. Also, the church in in Timor, it's the Protestant church, GKI? GMIT, GMIT. There were some leaders in GMIT, they supported the Masyarakat Adat. There were some leaders who supported the mine. Yeah? So, and they kept changing. Sometimes the mine was successful, sometimes the movement was successful, and it's still going on today. It's like a constant struggle on one side or the other. So this kind of contested means that people are trying to use religious symbols to try to promote their agenda, both the religious groups and both the movement and the other groups. So now I'll just finish with a conclusion, then I'll be done. Implikasi. Thanks for your patience. It's really good. So, implications, yes. So, what does this mean for studying kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari in Indonesia? So, we think that if we can see the focus of studying on kehidupan keagamaan sehari-hari daripada doktrin atau institusi keagamaan sehingga mendapatkan pemahaman, yes, lebih luas mengenai hubungan antara agama dan ekologi, baik agama berkontribusi pada kerusakan atau penyelamatan lingkungan. So it's better if we can study from a perspective of looking at the connections between lived religion and other things. So we can see agama sebagai sesuatu yang hidup di dalam masyarakat, membantu untuk menghindari bentuk esensialisme antara agama dari nilai-nilai budaya atau fenomena sosial terkait lainnya, dan membantu untuk melihat keragaman kehidupan keagamaan yang sangat dinamis, cair dan tidak final yang menyesuaikan dengan setting sosialnya. So I think this is an important way to look at it, and I think the concept of studying religion in the local context can be really helpful. And also, I think if we can use some different methods, like studying data yang sudah ada, rather than just doing case studies, because then we just say, okay, my case study says this, ada studi kasus hasilnya ini, studi kasus hasilnya lain, but there's not like a connection between them. So this could be helpful for us. So if we can have more studies that use reviews of data that already exists, then hopefully it can help to make sociological theory lebih kontekstual untuk konteks Indonesia, and not like now, as you know, the theory it's mostly sesuai konteks Barat dan konteks akademis, but mungkin tidak cocok dan tidak sesuai konteks Indonesia dan konteks lokal. So I think we need more studies that can do this. So I think that's banyak bicara. So terima kasih banyak for listening and for your discussion. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jonathan, for that presentation. Now it's time to open the floor for question and comments from audience. Please raise your hand if you have question, and I call on your in order. First, I give to 3 questioners. Yeah, okay. Please, audience. Please.
Me.
Yeah.
Ada rekamannya.
Ini pertama kali juga pakai begini ya. Selamat siang teman-teman, selamat siang John. Thank you for your presentation. By the way, your bahasa is really good. No problem with your bahasa. We really understood that you said in bahasa. By the way, when you did this research, um, especially for me, I didn't expect that our religion is very complex when we tryna mix between religion and tradition. With for example, like pawang hujan, it's kind of funny and sad at the same time because we still trust that pawang hujan, and meanwhile in other country they already make some artificial rain gitu, but we still try trust that pawang hujan begitu. Is it another crisis when we tryna trust pawang hujan because um, is it good for our religion because we tryna apa trust that kind of tradition. Thank you, John.
Okay. Sorry, and what was your name? Sorry.
Sorry, my name is Kevin.
Kevin. Kevin. Okay. Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah.
Okay, Mr.
Oh, it's satu-satu, or do you want?
One by one.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, it's okay. Kasih lah. Kasih ya. Okay. Yes, Kevin. Okay. So, I think this is actually, I think, a really, this idea about tradition and science is a real problem, but it's more of a problem, I think, following our mentality about them. Because if we think about this, there's actually a good article by Arun Agarwal from, he's a scholar from India and writing, this is back in the 1990s, and it's saying that, is there a difference between indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge? Is it any separate, or is it the same? And actually, the idea that we can say that knowledge is old or new is only in our mind, to say something is old or new. So because the traditions that have been used for example, untuk sistem pertanian seperti di Lombok atau di Jawa, the system is not just like you get pawang hujan to pray and you plant. It's a very, very complicated system that was developed over hundreds of years about how to take care of the land. And the system involves concepts of tradisi atau budaya atau agama, but it also includes technology of farming. Like using terraces, the system of using terraces for farming so that the water can circulate through the paddies, the different like alat that are used for farming. This is technology. It's not like tradition or something old, right? But when we create in our minds, there is you have to pick, okay, ada science atau ada tradisi. There's no connection between them. So, for example, now in Jakarta, they have the issue about the kualitas udara, yeah, with the level of pollution, and they try to come up with some new ideas. For example, they try to you go with a pesawat and you put something in the clouds to make it rain. Do you know this? Have you seen this? This is like a new kind of new technology. But the technology, they took the planes up to do it, but there were no clouds. So they couldn't use it in the technology because the technology only works in a place where you have already a lot of clouds. So using just science or technology, kalau tidak sesuai kearifan atau pengetahuan lokal, tidak berfungsi. Yeah. So the question is not like, do we have to pick between pawang hujan or agrometeorological farming, or choose between science or that, but it's, can we be creative to make technology cocok untuk konteks lokal, ya, untuk kebutuhan dan konteks lokal, dan juga untuk menghadapi perubahan iklim dan krisis lingkungan seperti itu. So that's how I think we were looking at it in this study. And this ini contoh dari Lombok, sangat menarik, I think. keren ini, because you have ada contoh, ada juga di Indramayu di Jawa Barat juga ada proyek seperti itu yang ada pawang hujan kerjasama dengan orang sains untuk diciptakan sistem pertanian baru. So yeah, it's interesting. Thanks, Kevin. Is that okay? Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Please, Alden. Bang. Ya.
Ya bisa, ya it's okay, it's okay. Kalau tidak paham, ya. Kalau tidak paham, saya bisa
Bahasa Indonesia.
tanya Mas Rando untuk menjelaskan bahasa Inggris.
Pertama ini, siap. Bang.
Oke. Oh ya, bisa.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Jonathan, for explaining the result your research. My name is Yones. I wanted to combine my speaking English and Indonesia
Okay.
because my speaking sometimes is not good, so I just try to use English. Okay. Before you talk about North Maluku, specifically in Halmahera, and I'm from Halmahera,
Oh yeah. Okay.
and you explain about two different movement environment and the local people. My question is, how should religion, specifically Christian and Muslim, do for help so they have contribute to make good our environment? And the second, I read your article in the CRCS, and you talk about declared in in France and Indonesian in Bali.
Oh yeah.
So you have a research about environmental in Indonesia. What the difference in the world and Indonesia?
Okay.
That's it. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, thank you, Yunus. Yeah. Can I ask about when you're saying the difference? Do you mean like about difference between like the dari like sistem dunia seperti UN seperti itu, or do you mean like the difference like in Inggris atau Amerika Serikat seperti itu? Ah, okay. Ah, okay. Ah, okay. The difference in these like the konteks barat seperti Inggris atau Amerika Serikat. Okay, yeah, good. Okay, thanks Yunus. Yeah. So, yeah, untuk like, I mean di Maluku dan like Indonesia Timur ada banyak kasus tentang like tambang dan dampak tambang untuk masyarakat lokal, and a lot of movements. And actually in Halmahera, the current conflict about a mine, it's a newer mine, a nickel mine, but there are also there have been other mines before, which also there have been conflicts. And there was one in, I think it was in just after the conflicts in Maluku between Christians and Muslims I think that was tahun 90 seperti itu. No, 99, yeah. So it was just after this time, and the company was trying to use the like division between Christians and Muslims to try to help them to build the mine. So they got permission from the Christian community, both in the this group, there was a Masyarakat Adat. Some of them are Christian and some are Muslim. So they got permission from the Christian ones to build the mine, and then it created a conflict with the Muslim ones because of the situation in Maluku. And because of this also, it meant that it was hard for the community to agree on supporting or opposing the mine, because they were using the division between Christians and Muslims to support the building of the mine. In this situation, there was a group of Christian and Muslim leaders, and they signed a letter together to say that we don't support the mine, and we also don't support that the company is trying to make a division between Christians and Muslims, because the situation in Maluku is very sensitive, and it's wrong to try to use this as a way to just support the mining company. So in this example, the leaders both, I think it was about like 25 tokoh agama, Christian and Muslim, they signed a statement together to oppose the mine. And actually this helped to stop the development of the mine in this situation. So it shows that when you have this division, that it can be used between communities, but also then if communities can work together, then it also can be really powerful way to kind of support an environmental movement, I think. So about the perbedaan between Indonesia and other countries, Well, it's interesting now. Ada di Inggris sekarang, there is a really strong like gerakan lingkungan. I'm sure you know actually ada juga di Indonesia climate strikes. You know the anak muda who go out from school and protest on Hari Jumat. Every Hari Jumat they go and protest. They leave SMA and they go out and protest. So they have this movement. It's a really big movement in the UK and in Europe. But often the movement tends to be focused in the UK and the US, focused more on the kebijakan nasional than kebijakan dunia, because these countries have more power to change the system dunia, or to change the policy about climate change. So often they focus more on those kind of big issues and not so much on the local environmental issues. But there are a lot of movements who do focus on the local environmental issues as well, especially in America Serikat. There are a lot of groups of orang asli, Native Americans, who are trying to stop the building of oil